आप सभी का पुनः स्वागत है। इस सत्र की अध्यक्षता कर रहे हैं आदरणीय प्रोफेसर ध्रुव ज्योति बोरा जी, और इस सत्र में प्रोफेसर संजुक्ता दास गुप्ता जी, प्रोफेसर सदानंद मोरे जी और डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह अपने आलेख प्रस्तुत करेंगे। इस सत्र का विषय है आदर्श तथा प्रेरणा स्रोत, और इस सत्र की अध्यक्षता कर रहे डॉक्टर ध्रुव ज्योति बोरा का मैं आपसे परिचय करा देता हूं। आप असमिया के प्रख्यात साहित्यकार हैं। आप पेशे से डॉक्टर हैं। उपन्यास, यात्रा वृत्तांत, लेख संग्रह आदि विधाओं में आपकी 24 पुस्तकें प्रकाशित हैं। आप पिछले 30 वर्षों से साहित्य से जुड़े हुए हैं और आपकी कुछ प्रमुख कृतियां हैं: कथा रत्नाकर, भूख, लोहा, यात्रिक और अन्याय, आजक रेगन सराय, ये 2 खंडों में, कालांतर गद्य, तेजर अंधार, अर्थ, ये आपके कुछ उपन्यास, फारसी विप्लव, द्वितीय महासागर, रूस महाविप्लव, ये इतिहास संबंधी कुछ पुस्तकें, इतिहास चिंता, अन्वेषण, आलेखों का संग्रह, देश नुहुआ देशोट, यात्रा वृत्तांत। आपने जोरहाट मेडिकल कॉलेज में प्रधानाचार्य तथा मेडिसिन इन र्यूमेटोलॉजी यूनिट में प्रोफेसर के पदों पर कार्य किया। आप मेडिकल काउंसिल ऑफ इंडिया की एथिक्स समिति के अध्यक्ष भी रह चुके हैं। आप वर्ष 2005 से WHO के परामर्शदाता और मेडिकल काउंसिल ऑफ इंडिया के सदस्य हैं। आपने भारत सरकार के विभिन्न मेडिकल कॉलेजों में काम किया है। आपको साहित्य अकादमी पुरस्कार, अंबिका राय चौधरी पुरस्कार, DP बसु पुरस्कार जैसे अनेक अलंकरणों से विभूषित किया गया है। आप साहित्य अकादमी के असमिया परामर्श मंडल के सम्मानित संयोजक हैं। मैं डॉक्टर ध्रुव ज्योति बोरा जी का साहित्य अकादमी की ओर से बहुत बहुत स्वागत और अभिनंदन करता हूं। डॉक्टर संयुक्ता दास गुप्ता एक प्रख्यात अंग्रेजी विदुषी, समालोचक और अनुवादक हैं। आपकी विभिन्न विधाओं, कविता, निबंध, अनुवाद आदि विधाओं में कई पुस्तकें प्रकाशित हैं। आपने कुछ पुस्तकों का संपादन भी किया है और सहलेखन में भी आपका काम है। कई पुस्तकों में लगभग 21 पुस्तकें आपकी प्रकाशित हो चुकी हैं। आपके लेख, कविताएं, कहानियां, अनुदित कार्य भारत तथा विदेशों की कई प्रतिष्ठित पत्रिकाओं में प्रकाशित हुए हैं। आपको अमेरिका, यूके, यूरोप, कनाडा तथा ऑस्ट्रेलिया के विभिन्न विश्वविद्यालयों में पढ़ाने, व्याख्यान देने तथा सम्मेलनों में सहभागिता हेतु आमंत्रित किया गया। वर्ष 2018 में आप गेजिलोनियन यूनिवर्सिटी, काराकाउ, पोलैंड में विजिटिंग प्रोफेसर रहीं। आप इंडियन पोएट्री एंड परफॉर्मेंस लाइब्रेरी, ICCR कोलकाता की कार्यकारी परिषद के अध्यक्ष हैं। आपको ब्रिटिश काउंसिल चार्ल्स वेलेस स्कॉलर ग्रांट, फुल ब्राइट एल्यूमिनी इनिशिएटिव अवार्ड, इंडिया काउंसिल फेलोशिप, IWSF वुमेन अचीवर अवार्ड जैसे कई सम्मानों से विभूषित किया गया है। आप कलकत्ता विश्वविद्यालय के अंग्रेजी विभाग में विभागाध्यक्ष और प्रोफेसर तथा फैकल्टी ऑफ आर्ट्स की डीन रह चुकी हैं। हम डॉक्टर संजुक्ता दास गुप्ता जी का भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत और अभिनंदन करते हैं। प्रोफेसर सदानंद मोरे प्रख्यात मराठी लेखक, इतिहासकार तथा समालोचक हैं। आपको 35 वर्षों से अधिक का अध्यापन का अनुभव है तथा आपने विभिन्न शैक्षिक पत्रिकाओं के प्रधान संपादक के रूप में भी कार्य किया है। आपकी 20 से अधिक पुस्तकें प्रकाशित हैं, जिनमें कविता संग्रह, समालोचना, नाटक तथा संपादित पुस्तकें शामिल हैं। आप नासिक में आयोजित प्रथम संत साहित्य सम्मेलन के अध्यक्ष रहे तथा 88वें अखिल भारतीय मराठी साहित्य सम्मेलन के अध्यक्ष के रूप में भी चुने जा चुके हैं। आप पुणे विश्वविद्यालय में दर्शन शास्त्र के विभागाध्यक्ष और प्रोफेसर रहे। आप सावित्रीबाई फुले विश्वविद्यालय पुणे से सेवानिवृत्त हुए। आपको साहित्य अकादमी पुरस्कार, एशियाटिक सोसाइटी मुंबई द्वारा मानद फेलोशिप, महाराष्ट्र राज्य पुरस्कार, SM जोशी पुरस्कार जैसे कई अलंकरणों से विभूषित किया गया है। हम डॉक्टर सदानंद मोरे जी का भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत और अभिनंदन करते हैं। इस सत्र में डॉक्टर मनमोहन जी का भी आलेख पाठ होना है। वे अभी कुछ देर में हम लोगों के बीच जुड़ जाएंगे। मनमोहन जी पंजाबी के प्रतिष्ठित कवि, उपन्यासकार, आलोचक और भाषाविद हैं। आपका पहला कविता संग्रह अगले चौराहे पर 1982 में प्रकाशित हुआ। आपकी प्रमुख प्रकाशित कृतियां हैं गुरुमुखी दी जुगत, संवादकी, दसम ग्रंथ विच मिथ रूपांतरण, नीलकंठ, कोहम, निर्वाण। अभी आपकी एक पुस्तक, आपका एक उपन्यास जो भरथरी के जीवन पर आधारित है, गहन गुफा में आसन, काफी चर्चा में है। आपको पंजाबी अकादमी दिल्ली द्वारा काव्य पुरस्कार, आलोचना पुरस्कार, गद्य पुरस्कार तथा साहित्य अकादमी पुरस्कार से सम्मानित किया जा चुका है। आप भारतीय पुलिस सेवा के वरिष्ठ अधिकारी हैं। हम मनमोहन जी का भी बहुत स्वागत करते हैं। हम अब ध्रुव ज्योति बोरा जी से अनुरोध करते हैं कि वे अपने अनुसार वक्ताओं को आमंत्रित करेंगे। संजुक्ता दासगुप्ता जी, टैगोर तथा सिस्टर निवेदिता का जो प्रभाव रहा भारती पर, उनके बारे में अपनी बात रखेंगी। तिलक और शिवाजी के प्रभाव पर सदानंद मोरे जी बोलेंगे और गुरु गोविंद सिंह का भारती के जीवन और कृतित्व पर क्या प्रभाव रहा उस पर मनमोहन सिंह जी बोलेंगे। हम डॉक्टर ध्रुव ज्योति बोरा को अब ये मंच सौंपते हैं।
आप सबको मेरा हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं और सादर आमंत्रण ये संगोष्ठी पर। It's really a matter of great pleasure to be here among such luminaries who would be talking today on various aspects. Till now, we have been discussing Subramania Bharathi and his contributions mainly to the Tamil literacy, whether it is short stories, fiction, or journalism. But he had a role which is not confined to Tamil Nadu. It is not only all India, it has gone beyond the borders of India, and it had such resonance all over our country that you cannot imagine how his ideas resonated and stimulated people all over our country. You see, ideas travel over great distances and in ways that are quite mysterious. There is no reason why ideas should travel from all the way from Tamil Nadu in the extreme south of our country to Assam situated in the extreme northeast. There's no reason why ideas should travel all these way. It is not only the question of great geographical distance, but the barriers and divides of language and culture, of race and ethnicity, caste and customs are too great and stark. Even at this moment, I think there will be hardly a dozen Assamese people who would be able to read and write Tamil language, which is so very different from the Sanskrit influenced Assamese. There is hardly any simile or connection between the two. Yet, despite that, ideas do travel. And the fact that they do or had done so is in reality a tribute to our country, which is diverse yet united in thought and percepts. Ideas come to acquire an autonomy of its own, and they can cease to be in control of anyone. They acquire a power, an autonomous power of their own and spread all over. Such things have happened in the past too. The Bhakti movement started in Tamil Nadu way back in the past and spread all over India, incorporating different regions, languages, and people. And one more thing, the Bhakti movement started out of the great and ancient Tamil poetic tradition of the Sangam poetry. Their universal themes of love and love in its various manifestations, and their adoration of rulers and leaders got transmuted in the poetry of the Saivite Nayanars and Vaishnavite Alwar poets into love for God Shiva and Vishnu principally, and adoration for the gods. Song and poetry of the poets which spread the message and ideology of bhakti all over our country. And bridging all divides, the idea of bhakti germinated in all the areas, in all languages, and it also reached Assam, the beautiful valley of the great Brahmaputra river. And the same ideas reverberated there under the leadership of Shankaradeva and his disciples within 7th to 9th centuries of the Bhakti movement starting in Tamil Nadu. In the same grand poetic tradition, Subramania Bharathi composed his songs and poems in Tamil. In treatment and subject, they were different altogether, but it belonged to the same great tradition. And this became phenomenally popular. And ideas of patriotism, love for motherland, the necessity of reforms of people and gender, the need to surmount caste divides of our society, all came out poems and songs of I'm surprised really how similar sentiments have been voiced in Assam by his contemporaries in Assam. I will just name two of them. One is, call him Gobind, the poet of fire, who mainly dealt with the social themes which were so close to Subramania. And another very contemporary, practically they lived in the same time frame, Giri Rai Chaudhuri, who has practically spoken exactly in the same languages. I don't know how the ideas travel, because there is no connection between Tamil and Assamese. But they do travel through so many other linguistic and other forms that they reverberate everywhere and do the same purpose. You see, one line of song speaks thousands way better than my saying and lecturing. So what I am doing now, I am just letting you hear 3 lines of the songs of Ambika Giri Rai Chaudhuri. Those are in Assamese, but they reverberate the same, and you will feel how they express the same ideas. Is it audible? क्यों कर उनको चला रहे हैं? यहाँ से अनम्यूट होगा ना? People are coming out in great songs for the freedom movement and how they are stimulated with the ideas of freedom and liberty. That is the main thing. It's a long song, but the theme is the same of patriotism, people coming out to fight the foreign enslavers and trying to snatch away freedom, the themes which are so close to Subramania Bharati's thinking. What I want to say at this moment is that these ideas that have traveled all over India have found resonance in different parts of our country and brought up all the fighting spirit, the endeavor for freedom of all our people. I think I'll stop here. We have got three very eminent speakers with us, and we are all waiting to hear their talks. I will first call upon Sanjukta Dasgupta ji, who will be talking about the effect or influence of Tagore and Sister Nivedita on the thinking of Subramania Bharati.
Thank you, Professor Bora. And good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to have you attending this session. And my friend Malashilal, who took a lot of trouble to reach this place early in the morning. Not easy, since COVID, things are different, and our mobility has also changed a lot, but it's wonderful to have you here. And also the very generous introduction in Hindi from Anupam. Such excellent Hindi that I can't match my Bollywood Hindi with that. So, so I will not even try. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपने मुझे introduce किया. I am bilingual, unfortunately. So, and of course, Professor Sirpi, whom I keep on meeting since I became a member of the General Council, and I learned so much from his composure, that whatever might be happening in the General Council, his very succinct remarks are the only things that matter in a whole meeting which becomes uproarious at sometimes. And this morning, it was also very nice to know about the way you have this strong analytical understanding of Subramania Bharathi. And for me, of course, it's like a classroom. I am learning every minute. The first session which I attended was like a workshop for me. I learned a lot from the little time I had there. And of course, Dr. Malan, who is being the chief architect of this particular seminar, and he's the chief planner who got me into this. And he understood that I didn't know much. So he also sent me a lot of very important material, thinking otherwise what a disaster she'll be. And so, so I'm embarrassed, but at the same time, I am very happy to have learned a lot. I cannot say I have any expertise on Bharati, but I have emerged as an enthusiast and as an appreciator of Bharati, because I come from a particular region where, of course, we are always told that Bengalis, everybody reads Bengali literature, and Bengalis are so wrapped in themselves that they do not pay attention to our literature. That is probably the case. And here I will, before I start my paper, here I also want to emphasize the lack of translations reaching other regions. Translations reaching other regions means that they should be part of the curriculum. This is something that I have been emphasizing since I joined the General Council in 2017-18. And unless it becomes a part of the curriculum, we do not learn. And therefore, and also seminars and workshops of this nature introduces us to writers from all parts of India who probably do not write in English or Hindi, the more easily understood languages. So it's a wonderful opportunity for me, and also a very enriching opportunity for me. And also, probably now that I've worked on it, I will also think in terms of getting it published somewhere. So it gives me an opportunity to do that also. So my paper is really a tribute to not only Subramania Bharathi, but the two people who inspired him in a very big way, Nivedita and Tagore. And of course, a little, probably not so prominent, but behind them is Swami Vivekananda. So September 11th, 2021 marked the centennial anniversary of the demise of one of colonial India's celebrated achievers, Subramania Bharathi, poet, translator, journalist, political activist, freedom fighter, social reformer, and polyglot, who is regarded as the founding father of modern Tamil literature. So in my presentation, which will be in the form of a tribute, it is not analytical as such, more descriptive, but it is also about certain juxtaposition of these cultural icons who come together in a sort of fusion of ideas, where especially in colonial India, it was so important that various iconic figures who could only write creatively, because writing political texts was tantamount to opening oneself up to the gaze of the Raj. That is precisely what had happened to Subramania Bharathi, because he was a journalist, as pointed out by Dr. Malan. What we find is that an arrest warrant was issued in his name. He had to go away to Pondicherry, and he stayed there till the end of the Second World War, that is 1918, came out, immediately he was arrested, and it was only with the intervention of Annie Besant and the others that he came out, and that time he was a physically broken man, because imprisonment really affected his health. But there is also another story about his being trampled by an elephant during his regular trip to the temple. But I'm always skeptical during the colonial Raj that it was only the elephant. It was the worst elephant was the British prison. And so I will just try to share my paper with you. So Subramania Bharathi, 1882 to 1921, about 39 years of life. Nivedita, 1867 to 1911. Vivekananda, 1862 to 1902, and Tagore, 1861 to 1941. Now, Vivekananda was 19 years senior to Bharati. Nivedita was older than Bharati by 14 years. Tagore was 21 years older than Bharati. But then the age difference is not a defining issue when great minds meet on an intellectual and cultural platform that time cannot erode. As Dr. Bora very finely pointed out, that the meeting of minds, the transfer of ideas, the cultural exchanges, when he put Assam and Tamil Nadu on the same platform in terms of mutual cultural understanding, we understand that this was an environment not only of euphoria, it was a very passionate environment of trying to free the country from the control of the British. And Tagore and Bharati had never met, though Tagore did travel to South India several times when Bharati was living. But there is a possibility that Bharati caught a glimpse of Tagore in 1921, as one of his essays state clearly. Bharati and Nivedita met once in Calcutta. That meeting left an indelible impression on the mind of Bharati, who regarded her as a source of inspiration and power, and also probably inspired him towards a significant feminist spirit, which was rather difficult to even project at the time in which he was writing because of the conservative responses to the role of women in society. So who was Sister Nivedita? Inspired, if not infatuated by the captivating speeches and towering personality of Swami Vivekananda, whom she met in London in 1895, the Irish school teacher Margaret Elizabeth Noble came to India in 1898, converted to the Hindu religion, and dedicated herself as a disciple of her self-declared master, Swami Vivekananda. As an active brahmacharini of the Ramakrishna mission, Margaret immersed herself in her role playing as the Hindu missionary Sister Nivedita. This period of 4 years, this is very important, mostly elided, marks specifically Nivedita's active association with the Ramakrishna mission. Even before he met her, from her various writings, Subramania Bharati realized that Margaret Nivedita was not just extraordinary, she was invincible. In the 21st century, we need to remember Nivedita not only as a spiritualist, but as a universal freedom fighter who expressed unequivocally her disenchantment with the British rule in India. Nivedita became an engaged activist who believed in spiritualized nationalism. In such respects, Nivedita's intellectual interactions with the poet Rabindranath Tagore, the universal humanist, stand out as evidences of mutual appreciation and friendship. In his essay on Nivedita, published after her death in 1911, Tagore had named Nivedita Lok Mata, or People's Mother. It is not unexpected that the poet and political activist Subramania Bharati, who was born and raised in the present Tamil Nadu, a native subject of the presidency of Madras in British India, would be deeply impressed by both Nivedita and Tagore, as I stated earlier. When Nivedita gave lectures in Madras in January 1902, that is soon after the death of Vivekananda, that is when she was released from the the duties and responsibilities of being a missionary in the Ramakrishna mission. So in January 1902 and then again in December 1902, Bharati was in Varanasi, an orphan student. The Ramakrishna movement was an early influence to most patriots in the Swadeshi movement, and Bharati was very much aware of it by the time he moved to Madras in the late 1904 as a young journalist in the nationalist Tamil daily Swadesh Mitran. July 1906, we see the arrival in Chennai of Swami Abhedananda, a direct disciple of Ramakrishna and a lieutenant of Vivekananda. Patriotism combined with a zeal to reform Hindu society held a big appeal for young nationalists like Bharati. And we learned from Malan again that of Bharati's interest in the Brahmo Samaj. The Brahmo Samaj, which is a sort of an offshoot of the Hindu religion, combines a bit of Buddhism and also Christianity. And Tagore often referred to the fact that these three influences were the sort of nurturing influences in terms of his own belief in culture, which is not something restricted to the very, very strong, conventional, traditional coils of the Hindu society. It is in this context that Bharati's first reference to Nivedita occurs. Writing a short piece on Vivekananda's patriotism in India, that is the newspaper in 1906, the weekly of which he was editor, he referred to Nivedita's series of essays, The Master as I Saw Him, then appearing in Prabuddha Bharata. Commenting on the apparent contradiction between the Maya advocated by Advaita and the love for one's country, he invoked Nivedita. 3 months later, in November 1906, Bharati now wrote a separate piece on Nivedita, referring to her as a gem among Vivekananda's disciples. He compared her to Vibhishana, which is strange, just as Vibhishana had been born among the Rakshasas, which means the British. Yes, and Nivedita had been born among the British. The difference is that Nivedita was Irish and she was completely against the British rule of Ireland. Yes, and her own parents and grandparents were also political activists. So it was in her DNA, this sort of protest and this sort of a revolutionary spirit. Bharati's readings in Nivedita gained a new impetus when in 1906 in December, on his visit to Calcutta to attend the annual session of the Congress, he met her in person. The meeting took place at Nivedita's home in 17 Bospara Lane in the Bagh Bazar area of North Calcutta, where she was living since 1902. Nivedita was 39 years old and Bharati a much younger 24. After the death of Vivekananda, Nivedita had resigned from the Ramakrishna mission and had involved herself with passion in the freedom struggle, much to the embarrassment of the British Raj. The impact of the meeting was deep and long-lasting and was evidently behind the series of book dedications that Bharati made. His wife, Chelamma, recalls that Bharati spoke with great emotion of this meeting of his. According to Bharati's wife, initially at least he had reservations thinking about a white-skinned woman. But sensing his discomfiture, Nivedita himself had cautioned Bharati, and I quote, against entertaining divisions based on caste, religion, creed, and lineage, and nurture only love in the heart. Love in the heart. So all spiritualists who also believe in this sense of patriotism speak about love, as did Mother Teresa. So Nivedita remained the only person to whom Bharati dedicated his books. To no other person, according to available data with me, he had not ever dedicated any of his books. Interestingly, on finding out that he was married, Nivedita had asked Bharati why his wife had not accompanied him. To his conservative reply that I have come to attend a political meeting, what will wives do in political meetings? Nivedita's reply was, if half the nation was enslaved, how could the other half hope to win freedom unless there was complete, total, equal participation. Apart from the cryptic dedications, unfortunately, Bharati wrote little directly on the meeting. Less than a month after this meeting, he recalled the wise words that Sister Nivedita had spoken to the author of this article. This is in Sarbodh Hanai. Sir, trying to reach a higher plane in life after pushing women into darkness is a futile exercise. It is but impossible. I wish we could claim him for our women's studies research centers. Yes. So luckily, one letter from Thiru Malachari, the proprietor of Bala Bharat, the English monthly edited by Bharati, to Nivedita, which survives in this 1907 letter. It reminded Nivedita of her meeting with Bharati and a really social and energetic man with whom you are personally acquainted. That is what they referred to. And unfortunately, it seems nothing of the correspondence has survived. The letter confirms that Nivedita was contributing to Bala Bharat and that Bharati wanted more contributions from her that would arouse. I don't know, we have people from South India, they may not like this expression, but it is not mine, it's Bharati's. Okay, he said, I hope Nivedita's contributions will arouse the sleeping South. So about 2 years later, there is a reference to Nivedita's comments on Ashwini Kumar Dutt's charity to the poor. A most substantive reference was on the premature death of Mandaya Malasinga Perumal, Vivekananda's propagator and Bharati's benefactor. As Bharati recalled, to his remark that there was no senior patriot in the South to provide guidance to youth like him, Nivedita had sent a reply saying, why? Isn't there Alagia Singha Perumal? If you have doubts regarding public matters, you may seek his advice. So you see, there was a robust correspondence between the two of them. Soon after this, the Swadeshi movement collapsed, crushed by brutal colonial repression. When Nivedita passed away on October 13, 1911, an exiled Bharati, he's gone off to Pondicherry, his journals and books banned, had no avenue to express his sorrow. References to Nivedita disappear from his later writings, although he published many books in the 10 years after her death. In January 1908, Bharati published a book of 16 poems titled Swadesa Geethangal, which carried a short dedication. I dedicate this short book to the flowers at the feet of my Guru, who, like Lord Krishna, revealing his Vishwarupa to Arjuna and explaining the nature of the soul, displayed to me the complete form of Sampurna of Bharat Mata and taught me Swadesa Bhakti. How cosmopolitan can a person from a very conservative, tradition-bound South India recognize a white woman as the Bharat Mata, as Abanindranath Tagore did in his painting of the Bharat Mata. The unnamed guru was none other than Nivedita. In 1908, also, Bharati dedicated his national poems, Swadesa Geethangal, which I just referred to Nivedita. And exactly a year later, Bharati published a second volume of his Swadeshi songs, this time from his political exile in Pondicherry. Consisting of 17 poems, this book is dedicated to my Guru Mani Simati Nivedita Devi, the spiritual daughter of Bhagwan Vivekananda. Now, interestingly, Vivekananda had written in 1898 about Nivedita in a very short poem. He had written, how are we doing for time? Okay. The mother's heart, the hero's will, the sweetness of the southern breeze, the sacred charm and strength that dwell on Aryan altars flaming free, all these be yours and many more. No ancient soul could dream before. Be thou to India's future son, the mistress, servant, friend in one. Vivekananda mostly wrote his poems in English, interestingly. These 8 lines, which I just read, profoundly traditional and romantic, is an encomium by Swami Vivekananda, and addressed to his disciple Nivedita. The lines underscore the impression that Nivedita possessed a commendable androgynous spirit. Therefore, she would be able to intelligently combine maternal affection and heroic willpower, and which was the required chemistry that could inspire India's future sons to fight after India's freedom from British rule. Vivekananda's poem resonates in Bharati's poem dedicated to Nivedita in 1910, and the source is the ace journalist Malandya. And I've just quote. This is from Janaratham. I bow unto my mother Nivedita, see the connection, who is dedicated to grace, a temple of love, sun to the darkness of my heart, rain to the crop of my great country, riches to the wretched poor, and fire that burns despicable thraldom. In fact, I tried to access Bharati's posthumously published book, Agni and Other Poems and Translations. This book is in English. It was published in 1937, but I could not find a copy anywhere. Probably the National Library may have a copy. In a way, Nivedita's conversion to the Hindu religion is a classic evidence of appropriation and fashioning of a colonizer's representative by the colonized. In his letter addressed to Margaret Noble in 1897, before she reached India, Vivekananda had written, "Let me tell you frankly that I am now convinced that you have a great future in the work for India." Where were the Indian women? Here he is really welcoming an Irish woman to come and work for the Indians. To work for the Indians, women especially. India cannot yet produce great women. She must borrow them from other nations. Your education, sincerity, purity, immense love, determination, and above all, the Celtic blood make you just the woman wanted. That was Vivekananda. So, and what was Nivedita's response? Because this is what Bharati was following very, very closely. Because it was Nivedita's response that inspired Bharati. Because Bharati was a political activist. He was a freedom fighter. And this is what Nivedita wrote about India. The whole history of the world shows that the Indian intellect is second to none. Lovely. Yes. This must be proved by the performance of a task beyond the power of others, the seizing of the first place in the intellectual advancement of the world. Is there any inherent weakness that would make it impossible for us to do this? Are the countrymen of Bhaskaracharya and Sankaracharya inferior to the countrymen of Newton and Darwin? This is what Nivedita asks. We trust not. It is for us, by the power of our thought, to break down the iron walls of opposition that confront us and to seize and enjoy the intellectual sovereignty of the world. So it is this inspiration, this is the instilling of confidence to the colonized that comes from a white woman that is looked upon as such a positive way in which Nivedita steered the freedom fighters, including Sri Aurobindo, for that particular period before the Pondicherry period began. And so in his essay, as I referred to this earlier also, Tagore had named her Lokmata, or people's mother. And here this motherhood is also very important because, again, I'm sure Bharati had read Gora, which was published in 1910. This is not about the biological mother. This is about a mother who is a maternal spirit for all human beings. And Gora was an Irish man. Yes, so all this taken together, the biological and legal motherhood is not as important as the empathy that a woman experiences in her love for her own children, in this case, the entire country. Moreover, Tagore's surmise about Nivedita's understanding of Hinduism once again interrogated orthodox attitudes of blind faith. So Tagore wrote, She looked at Hinduism from a historical and scientific point of view. If one could accept her point of view, challenging age-old stereotypes and superstition, the foundations of the whole structure of popular Hinduism would be dealt a severe blow, unquote. I don't want to go into these troubled areas anymore. I had felt her, and then Tagore wrote, I had felt her great power, but with all that I understood that her path was not for me, writes Tagore. She was a versatile genius, and there was another thing in her nature, her militancy. She had power, and she exerted that with full force on the lives of others. When it was not possible to agree with her, it was impossible to work with her. So Tagore finally wrapped up his essay by writing, he who had seen her has seen the essential form of a human being, the form of the spirit. It is a piece of good fortune to be able to see how the inner being of a person reveals itself with unobstructed and undiminished energy and effulgence. She was in fact a Lokmata. We had not seen before an embodiment of the spirit of motherhood, which, passing beyond the limits of the family, can spread itself over the whole country. Now, I'll just briefly go on to Bharati and Tagore's association. And Bharati's first direct reference to Tagore comes in an essay he had written in 1915, narrating the now familiar tale of an ancient glory and medieval decline. Bharati saw the first rays of an Indian awakening during this time. We now see the signs of resurgence in everything. The Indian nation has been born anew. The whole world now acknowledges that Rabindranath is one of the Mahakavis of our times. The global acknowledgement of Tagore was a recurrent theme because Tagore in 1913 received the Nobel Prize. He was deeply impressed by Tagore's international recognition. While defining what being famous meant, Bharati, who regarded Tagore as, Bharati's words, I quote, king of poets, said, the fame secured by one for a whole nation is fame. Rabindranath has convinced the whole world that India is the global guru. How did he come upon this very trendy phrase? I cannot imagine. Yes, India is the global guru. Long live the sacred flower feet of his. Bharati translated into Tamil extracts from the Crescent Moon, Tagore's collection of poems and stories, and his joy in translating them is more than apparent. While these were prose translations, a year later he translated a Tagore poem on the glory of national education in 4 stanzas. Bharati commented at length on Tagore's 1916 talk at the Imperial University of Tokyo and translated extensive passages from it. He saw Tagore's message as the awakening of a sleeping Asia by Japan. In his view, Tagore was only continuing Vivekananda's task. Vivekananda only revealed the exercise of the spirit. Tagore has now been sent by Mother India to show to the world that worldly life, true poetry, and spiritual knowledge are rooted in the same dharma. Assessing Tagore's credentials for this task, Bharati continues that the Gitanjali and other books that he has translated and published in English are short. They are not extended epics or big plays. He revealed just a few lines of his lyrics, but the world was amazed. He was totally in admiration for Tagore. And in 1921, in another essay he wrote, Sri Rabindranath's Conquest of the World. Conquest, yes? So here is almost a posing of a colonized, now emerging as a warrior and a conqueror. It's a fantastic way in positioning Bharati in these lines, in Tagore by Bharati in these lines. And then he caught a glimpse of Tagore, according to the available material from me, made available to me by Malan. And this is that from which I am just quoting. As soon as Sri Rabindranath Tagore entered the hall, we felt a power beyond the reach of our minds. It was clear that there wouldn't have been a single second in this man's life when he would not have been one with the boundless universe. And in the same essay, Bharati asserted, Tagore has made the whole world be indebted to him by clarifying several new truths and dharmas that will thus unite together Asia and Europe through his remarkable writings and speeches. So Tagore was an icon, an inspiration, an ideal person to follow. And so when Bharati died in 1921, Tagore lived for another 20 years. Tagore died in 1941. Nivedita died of illness in 1911. There was no existing references in Bharati's writings about Nivedita, which I already referred to. As he re-entered British India in 1918, on his return from his self-exile in Pondicherry, the British police promptly arrested him in 1918, which I also referred to. And finally, the last few years of Bharati's life were mired by illness, poverty, and an unfortunate accident. But the poet-patriot, the freedom fighter's poetic lines still resonate in our minds with tremendous impact, as Subramania Bharati validates his relevance in the 21st century, 100 years after his demise. I'll read his translated poem, Freedom. This is translated by S. Prema. It's the poem. When will this thirst for freedom slake? When will our love of slavery die? When will our mother's fetters break? When will our tribulations cease? Wasn't there another Bharat? Reread by our noble Aryan race? Lead us, Aryan, to victory. Isn't right we remain slaves? Are famine and disease alone our share? For whom then are the laurels and fruits? Will you abandon us, your suppliants? Can the mother cast her child aside? Brave warrior, Aryan Lord, thou destroyer of the demon race, where is your dharma? Isn't yours the duty to revive us and chase fear away? In these concluding lines of the poem, isn't yours the duty to revive us and chase fear away? Subramania Bharati, like all universal poets and visionaries, the unacknowledged legislators of the world, as poet-patriots have been defined by the rebel English poet Shelley, joins Vivekananda, Nivedita, and Rabindranath Tagore in the fervent prayer for a world where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, and where the world has not been broken into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Thank you for your.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Sanjukta Dasgupta.
you.
It has been a very erudite and beautiful presentation, which has really gone deep into the relationship between four great minds, I would say. Subramania Bharati, Rabindranath Tagore, Sister Nivedita, and Vivekananda. And look at how things happen, or rather happened in those times during the freedom movement when it was surging, and how there was unity of thought and perception. It has been a really illuminating paper. Thank you, Sanjukta.
Thank you so much.
So I now call upon Sadananda Moreji to talk about Tilak and Shivaji and their influences on Subramania Bharati.
Respected Chairman Sir and friends, let me thank Sahitya Akademi for organizing this seminar and of course inviting me and giving me an opportunity to express my homage and respect for Subramania Bharati. What I want to do in this presentation is to shed some light on how the nationalist feelings emerged, especially in the end of 19th century and beginning of 20th century. And exactly at this juncture, especially in the beginning of 20th century, the activities of Subramania Bharathi become relevant. And for that purpose, I will try to say something regarding Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak. And why these two? Because it was Shivaji Maharaj who inspired Lokmanya Tilak and a number of freedom fighters. And similarly, and perhaps more important than this, that when the nation as a whole was under the colonial yoke and it wanted some kind of, you can say, representative, symbolic hero who could provide an inspiration to the whole movement, it could be done through Chhatrapati Shivaji and of course by Lokmanya Tilak. So Lokmanya Tilak, in order to spread the national movement nationwide, really speaking, he made a very sincere, although skillful, use of what Chhatrapati Shivaji contributed to what we call freedom. And it is really interesting to see how Tilak could do it. Now, let me begin with one important remark, that Tilak was responsible and pioneer, really speaking, of starting Ganesh Festival and also starting Shivaji Festival in Maharashtra. Now, how these two were connected, or why two? Was one not sufficient for the purpose? And let me then work out the things in the way which I propose to do. You know, Tilak began his social and political career as an editor of the newspaper Keshari and Maratha. Now, in early 90s, there were riots between Hindus and Muslims. And everybody had to be cognizant of that, to take cognizance of that and to react and to find solutions. Now, most of the, intellectuals in Maharashtra, including the liberal intellectuals like Justice Ranade and others, the moderates like Firoz Shah Mehta and others, they were almost of the same opinion regarding these riots, same as to Lokmanya Tilak. But there was a difference. And what was the difference? Different was that there were definitely struggles, conflicts, wars, battles between the Muslim rulers who came as invaders from the western side, and they ruled. They conquered the native princes. Most of them were, of course, the Hindus by religion. And they ruled for centuries, till, of course, Shivaji Maharaj. But the point is that there were no riots between the Hindus and the Muslims as people. Now, this phenomenon became possible during the British rule, colonial rule, because they had their own policy of divide and rule. They started playing Hindus and Muslims against each other so that their rule could continue. Now, may I tell you that when there was upsurge of 1857, the Britishers treated Muslims as the villains for them. And then for a couple of decades, almost up to 80 or 90, they tried to favor the Hindus. and eliminating the Muslims because they wanted to do such things. But when the Indian National Congress was established and when Sir W. Hunter brought out some of the important things regarding the Islam and possibility of their rebel, then the Britishers changed the policy and decided to favor the Muslims as against the Hindus. And therefore, when the riots started, they favored the Muslims. Now the riots, although they started in Prabhaspattam, Gujarat, Junagadh district, they spread, elsewhere also, including Maharashtra, including Mumbai and then Pune, and some pockets in Maharashtra. Now, what were we to do then? What were people to do then? And most of the people could understand this point that these British rulers, they are behind these things and they are protecting the Muslims against the Hindus. So the question was, if the rulers, that is to say the Britishers, were not performing their duties, that is to say protecting the Hindus from the Muslims, what Hindus were supposed to do, what expected to do? It was Tilak who could say that, well, this is the time when Hindus, because in the absence of course, due to the absence of protection from the state, they should go for, or they should come out for their own defense. And if it needs, they may go for counterattack. That was Tilak's policy. And this was not appreciated by the liberals and the moderates at that time. So we could find that Tilak challenged this leadership, the present leadership at that time of Justice Ranade and Firoz Shah Mehta and other persons, and he said that, well, Hindus should defend themselves, protect themselves by counterattacking, because the government is not performing its duty. That was Tilak's position, and therefore he called the public meeting of the Hindus in Pune, and this was not appreciated by the orthodox moderates like Ranade and others. And then there was a kind of schism in these two groups. And it was at this moment that Tilak could gather support from the common Hindu co-religious people. And that is how Ranade's leadership started falling behind. And the leadership of Tilak emerged. Now, the point is that Tilak was not treating the Muslims as the enemies. Tilak was seeing that this thing could be performed by the Muslims too if the Hindus attack them and the British government didn't protect the Muslims. That was Tilak's policy, that the government should see the things equally, protect their citizens with equal treatment and all those things. And therefore, Tilak could emerge as the protector, the spokesman, you can say, the representative of the Hindu community at that time, in spite of, he himself didn't want to have these things, but it was the British government which compelled Tilak to take this position and act accordingly. Now, fine. This, so far as the riots were concerned, after the end of the riots, what happened in Pune in particular, and that was the emergence of the Ganesh festival, public festival. In Pune, it happened that the Punaite Hindus, in fact, all people from Pune used to participate in the Muharram. In fact, it is not actually festival, but it has been treated as on par of festivals, really speaking. Yes, they had their own, in every pet of Pune, we could find that the tabuts are established by the Hindus themselves, and both the communities participating there. Now, because of these riots, the Hindus could not, continue this practice of participating in Muharram, or even establishing the tabots for 10 days. And they wanted a kind of alternative. Now, it was Tilak who provided this alternative festival, public festival, you can say, in the form of Ganesh festival. And there are surprising similarities in these two festivals because, you know, see the durations. The duration is of 10 days. The tabut is established and then it is sunk. Similarly, the Ganesh is established, okay, ritualistically, and after 10 days, sink. Now you can look at the similarity, and then Tilak could, you know, fulfill this void on the part of the Hindus with this kind of Ganesh festival, and you can the position of the government also at that time. But the point is that Tilak emerged as the leader of the particular community. This is one thing. Now, when coming to the next stage, Shivaji Festival, what happened so far as the Shivaji Festival is concerned? And this is important. As Ganesh was, really speaking, the god across the castes and communities of Hinduism. In Maharashtra, there has been tradition of, you know, worship of Ganpati. Everything which you want to start, we start it with, you know, provoking, with evoking Ganesh. So therefore, Tilak could enjoy considerable response. But at the same time, Tilak could also see the limitations of this movement of Ganesh festival. And what were the limitations? The limitations were that the god Ganesh was the god of a particular religion. And therefore, it is not possible that he could ask other religious people to join the festival and celebrate it, etc., etc. And there was definitely the need for that particular festival, public festival, which could be accepted, you know, across the caste, across the religions, and throughout the nation. And this alternative he could find in Shivaji. Therefore, he had to reinterpret the traditional, you know, biographical interpretation of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. How did he do it? See, there were some of the important things, events happened in the life of Shivaji. And most important perhaps, and the catchy one is, you know, Shivaji assassinated Abdul Khan. And the historians have depicted this kind of thing which Shivaji did. Something immoral, something treacherous, and so that. Now, it was for Tilak to point out that Shivaji did this not as a Hindu should do something against the other religious person, that is Islam. And so the quarrel was not between representatives of two religions, Hindu against Islam. Really speaking, he said that the Islamic, you know, rulers at that time, they were tyrannical, they were oppressive, they were exploitative, they were repressive. And what Shivaji did was something against such things as exploitation, repression, suppression, etc., etc. Not as a Muslim, as a Hindu acting against the Muslim. And further, and perhaps more importantly, see, he could have accepted the Islamic rule, which was exception to such things, exploitation, repression, etc., etc. And moreover, and this is perhaps more important in the sense that he went on seeing on record to the extent of this, that if to stand against the oppression on the part of the ruler, then even the Muslim could raise against the Hindu ruler if they are if they are oppressive, and vice versa. And more than that, perhaps, and this is perhaps the most important thing, he said that our next Shivaji could be born as Muslim. And therefore, you see, there is no difficulty for those people who are not Hindu to accept Shivaji as a national hero and to take inspiration from him and against the present oppressive rule, the colonial rule of Britishers. So this was the great contribution of Tilak. Now, apart from what he did in Maharashtra, he was in very good relations with Bengal, and he had some lectures on Shivaji in Bengal, and the Bengalis were attracted to the biography of Shivaji because of Tilak. Rabindranath Tagore wrote a poem, important poem on Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and therefore, because of the Tilak's efforts and Tilak's building of Shivaji's image differently, led many people from India, including Muslims, to accept Shivaji as the national hero. And this kind of symbolic appeal was a necessity so far as the freedom struggle was concerned, and Tilak could do it. Now, after that, there was the Indian National Congress session in Pune in 1895, and for that session, a number of delegates came from all over India. One of them was Surendranath Banerjee, and Lokmanya Tilak, let me tell you, arranged a kind of public meeting regarding Chhatrapati Shivaji in Pune, which was chaired by Surendranath. And therefore, Shivaji came to be accepted by other Indians, other than the Maharashtrians, as their own national hero, and who could provide inspiration from the freedom struggle against the British rule. That was Tilak's contribution so far as Shivaji is concerned. So Tilak could paint Shivaji in such a way to present him as, a freedom fighter against the tyrannical rule, whosoever it was, different story. It could be of Muslims, it could be of Hindus, it could be of anyone else. That it was of Muslim was a kind of historical accident. And Tilak said that we need not overestimate these accidental things, and we would concentrate the spirit of freedom of Shivaji Maharaj. So that is how Chhatrapati Shivaji's festival, which was begun by Lokmanya Tilak, could appeal not only to Maharashtrian people, but people from the other provinces and other religions too. Now, it was not an accident. One must point out this, that because of Tilak, that Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was accepted to be a kind of icon, kind of hero. And not only that, but the Muslims could accept Tilak as their leader. So we have Maulana Hasrat Mohani, we have Ali brothers, Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali, and of all the persons, of course, Barrister Jinnah. And the whole thing culminated in what is known as Lucknow Pack. In 1916, people know that Muslim League and Congress entered into a kind of pact, a kind of contract. And the League was represented by Barrister Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and Congress was represented by Lokmanya Tilak, and Hindus and Muslims, they entered into a kind of pact according to which the certain number of seats were to be reserved for the Muslims. And this number exceeded the real number of Muslims or the ratio of the Muslims in the population of India. And therefore, some of the followers of Tilak himself, they opposed Tilak that this is not a correct policy because the number exceeds, really speaking, the demand is excessive, and you have agreed. So Tilak replied them that after all, Hindus and Muslims in this country are in future are to live in this country only, whereas the Britishers are really foreigners and they will quit sometimes or the other. They will leave this country, and therefore these two religious communities have to adjust with one another among themselves and have to stay peacefully. But his policy was that if one community is more dominant than the other, then the peace, really speaking, which we desire, may come into danger. So both of them must be some kind of equality so far as strength is concerned. And the next important condition is that the state power, government should look at them equally. Without that, there cannot be, peaceful relations between Hindus and Muslims. But the very thing that Tilak was accepted as the leader by both communities because of his own personality and because of the heroic icon which he projected in political movement, that of Shivaji. And you will find that Tilak changes his policies and etc. strategies according to the situation. So it was because of Tilak's, you may use the word, I have no objection there, provocation. You can see the thing negatively if you want. The Hindus in Pune, stopped joining and participating in the Muharram and went for their own Ganesh festival because of Tilak. At the same time, you will observe that in the last days of his life, Tilak used to join the festivals like Muharram. Personally, there are photographs available. He used, Ajmer Sharif Dargah and was very cordially welcomed by the Muslim people there. And that is how Tilak could emerge as the national leader of Indian freedom fight. One can say that, really speaking, and with this I will conclude my representation. One can see that Tilak was, really speaking, the first leader of the national level. Before Tilak, there were definitely great personalities in India, great leaders in India, but they couldn't enjoy the nationwide support, nationwide fellowship, whereas you will find nationwide followers. Whereas you will consider Tilak, you will find that it was Tilak who for the first time would appeal to the whole nation as such. And one of the important element you can say of his success was he first succeeded in projecting Chhatrapati Shivaji as the iconic national hero who could provide the inspiration. And after Shivaji, people could look at Tilak as their inspiration. I'm grateful to the authorities of the academy and those who participated and of course listen to, or you can say virtually observe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sadananda Moreji. It has been a very analytical and incisive talk about those days when the freedom movement was looking not only for leaders, but also for inspirations and idols. And it was the genius of Lokmanya Tilak that he, first starting the Ganesh festival, could realize the historical limitations of that and go for the Shivaji festival, which to a great extent was able to bridge the bridge. It has been a very nice presentation, and all of us were extremely benefited, and I personally learned a lot from your discourse. Thank you. And our next and the last speaker is Manmohan Singh Ji. And I see that he is waiting there to talk. And from him, we will expect about Guru Gobind Singh Ji and his role as an idol and inspiration, not only to the Sikhs, but to the entire nation. Manmohan Singh Ji, please start.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Burga Sahab. I am very thankful to the organizer and the Sahitya Academy that they have given me this opportunity to develop upon the Guru Gobind Singh contribution to the nation, or especially his impact on the thinking and the poetry of Subramania Bharathi. Since this seminar is largely based upon the contribution of Subramania Bharathi in literature or in the national struggle, freedom struggle. Guru Gobind, in Sikhism, there are two Granths. One is Guru Granth Sahib, which was edited by fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Dev. And the Sikhism or Sikhs, they revered this Granth as a Guru. Simultaneously, there is another Granth authored by Guru Gobind Singh, which is called Dasam Granth. And in this Granth, there are 16 long poems. Mostly, the poems are divided into two factions. One is the religious poems, and other is the mythological poems. Guru Gobind Singh born on 22nd December 1966 in Patna Sahib. And he was anointed as a Guru of Sikhs in November 11th, 1675. And on April 13, 1699, he established a Khalsa Panth in a congregation, in a very large congregation at Anandpur Sahib. And Subramania Bharathi wrote a poem on Guru Gobind Singh with the special reference of that congregation in which the Khalsa Panth was established. And he also referred few mythological entities in his long poem, like Kali. You see, in Dasam Granth, Guru Gobind Singh poetry can be divided into two, religious poems and mythological poems. Religious poems are Jap, Akal Ustat, Vichitra Natak, Gyan Prabodh, Shabd Hazare, Savaiye, or Khalsa Mehma. The mythological poems, there are Vichitra Natak, Chandi Charitra Ukt Bilas, Chandi Charitra II, Var Durga Ki, 24 Avatar, Brahma Avatar, Rudra Avatar, Asphotic Kabit, or Shastra Naam Mala. These are 16 long poems. You see, in religious poems, he revered and he praised the Akal Purakh. But in mythological poems, he made the mythological entity into poetic entity through his poetic process. Like I will give you an example. Durga, there is a Markandeya Puran. In Markandeya Puran, there is a story called Makhasar Mardan. That is enshrined into Markandeya Puran, and the entity there is Durga. What Guru Gobind Singh does in his poem Chandi Di War, he take that mythological story and the mythological entity of Durga, and in his own poetry process, he transformates it into Chandi, which is a poetic transformation, poetic manifestation of Durga. And it has physical manifestation also, which is called Sri Talwar, Kirpan. So there are three levels. One is a mythological level, which is a conceptual level. Other is a poetry level, which is Chandi level. And third is a physical, that is Kirpan, Sri Sahib, Tor Talwar. So with this the paradigm of these three entities, he established his poetry, his long poem Chandi Di War. So, and this Chandi has a very significance, semiological significance in the whole the Sikh philosophy and the Sikh way of life. What does Subramania Bharati in his long poem, he referred when the congregation was called there at Anandpur Sahib and Khalsa Panth was established. It was a sort of a ritual, and Guru Gobind Singh asked 5 from the 6 who gathered there that I want 5 heads of the disciples, and one by one, the people emerges from the congregation, and he went inside the tent, and then he sacrificed the goat there, and then after the whole ceremony, all these 5 pyaras, they emerge into the stage as a Khalsa or as a Panj Pyara. Especially this he refers Subramania Bharati in his poem, and he make a special reference of Kali, which is also a mythological manifestation of Durga. So I will read from his poem 2-3 stanza. First he called Guru Gobind Singh as a hero of Panchal. He referred Punjab as a Panchal, which in the Indian Sanatan history, Punjab is called Panchal. Second, he also referred Durga as a Kali. I will read from his poem. And streaked like a lightning before the assembly, playered by the first sacrifice, the kingly Guru held aloft the sword again and spoke. I sought the consent to thrust the sword into a human chest. Another sacrifice the goddess seeks. Devotees, is there another one as bold before you to offer blood to slake the thirst of Kali? Another warrior bold stood and his consent let known. The great Guru took him into the temple and carried out the sacrifice and came out. The crowd quailed at seeing the blood, 5 sacrifices, thus he was greatly pleased to complete. So in this poem, he referred that congregation, second, that ritual of sacrifice, and he evoked the mother goddess, the Kali, again in next stanza. He says, and the Guru fetched the 5 to the assembly. From out the temple, the followers were amazed. They cried in joys, rubbed their eyes, and looked at them once again. Hail, hail, Guru Guru of Gurus, Lion of Gurus. Thus they sing and dance with many are sounding hail, smiled hail, the avatar of grace, like the splendorous sun, and the five faultless ones embraced, blessing them, the assembly he addressed. His words echoed like a roaring sea. Goddess Kali and the mother of your golden land were one and the same, you godly devotees. 5 times I went in to perform the sacrifice. Thus, awesome terror inflicting in you, that was but an outward play. The life of any one of you would I ever take. It was I who concealed all the 5 and put your character in to a proving test. Convinced indeed am I of the true sons of the beauteous motherland, and the sword today did cut to pieces only 5 gods sees. Through this test, your courage great I have found, and glad at heart I am. My cares are gone indeed. So, in this whole long poem, he specially referred that conjugation there, and he took inspiration from the Markandeya Puran story of Mahasur Mardani. And I have not read the whole of Subramaniam Bharati. This poem was given to my Dr. Manan, and since my doctorate is on Dasam Granth, so I thought it is I can elaborate this poem in the special reference to Dasam Granth. So with these lines, I conclude my presentation, and I once again thank to Sahitya Academy that they have given me opportunity to address this auspicious gathering. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manmohan Singh Ji. It was a really nice, short, yet very incisive presentation of Guru Gobind Singh, and especially the Dasam Granth, and at what different levels it speaks of, and also how it came to the Guru Gobind Singh's activities, how it came to influence Subramania Bharati ji into writing an eulogy about the 10th Guru. And it is really nice, and it has very beautifully brought out the question how we choose our idols in this world. They have to serve certain purpose at certain historical times. And it is for this we always look for inspirations which are pertinent and idols which are appropriate for those times. And Subramania Bharati was successful in doing exactly that. And by his actions, he himself has become an idol of the nation. With these words, we have come to the end of this Sangosti. Sangosti or Satra? Sangosti. Satra. And I'm very, very thankful to all the speakers who have spoken so well. I'm thankful to all the audience who are present here. I'm thankful to Sahitya Academy for organizing this beautiful fest. I would call it a festival rather than a national seminar, and within it, this particular very pertinent session. Thank you all.
I have a question for Das Gupta. Can you guess why Bharati has not mentioned Nivedita when he spoke about Lokmata and all that?
Yes, but would you like to?
No, I have no idea.
My guess is that from the available historical evidence that around from 1908 to almost 1918, Bharti was in Pondicherry. Nivedita herself was not in India from 1908, around the time when the New Alipur bomb conspiracy which happened, which led to Aurobindo being also jailed along with Badin Ghosh, his brother. And there was also a prospect of Aurobindo being sent to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, yeah, to the cellular jail. So Aurobindo moved to Pondicherry via Chandanagar, as far as I know. And then Bharti also, when there was an arrest warrant against him, he also went away to Pondicherry. So being there, the French were giving them protection. And now again, if they sort of engaged in political activities out there, then probably the French providing that security would not have been available to them. So, turning towards spiritualized nationalism was a very, very pertinent option at that time. I mean, there is no question of unnecessary bravado when you have to really wage an ongoing struggle against such a huge power. And so, when he went there, he did not ever refer to Nivedita because it would have even got Nivedita into trouble. Yes, because the British would have jailed her also. There was a strong possibility of the British jailing Nivedita as well. And so, the historical facts, which I can say this very easily because I'm not a historian. Yes, but a historian will be more careful about facts. But my speculations, I think, are not absolutely off the mark. But Malan, who has been in journalism for a very, very long time, he can also contribute to this conversation if we have time.
Aurobindo was, British was looking for Aurobindo. At one point of time, they were to evict Aurobindo and 4 more people from Pondicherry. It was Bharati who met the French officials and then talked to them and saw to that they were retained at Puducherry. And in fact, that was the time the British come to know the proficiency of Bharati in English, because the whole conversation took place in English. And they asked Bharati, have you ever studied abroad? And he said, no, I studied in Bharati. So Aurobindo also later on turned more towards spiritualism. If you look at the history of the people who have taken to extreme political violence or nationalist violence, they have later on turned more towards spiritualism. That whole process has to be studied. In my opinion, there could be something connected with the Indian culture. You can see that in Subhash Bose, who later was believed to become a hermit. And you can see that in Aurobindo Ghosh. And you can see that we had a person called Neelakandan. He was called Neelakandan Brahmachari. He also became later on a kind of a sage. So probably one of the earliest inspirations for Bharati was Nivedita was connected with the Irish rebellion movements. As you said, even Nivedita's parents were connected with that. In fact, in the first meeting between Swami Vivekananda and Nivedita, they are discussing this. And Bharati always had, he had seen 3 revolutions, Irish, French, and then subsequently the Russian. So up to a point of time, he might have thought India should have also gone through a revolution, but that had never happened. Then probably he would have explored the reasons why it had not happened. So every one of them had kind of a, as you correctly use that term, spiritualist nationalism. They belong to that kind of a thing. They have never seen spiritualism is something and nationalism is something. They didn't think that spiritualism is a personal pursuit and that has got nothing to do with the politics of the country. A great deal to be studied.
So if I may be commented, I think what Madam says, what Madam said needs to be studied a little more, because 1908, from that time, there was also a kind of unrest in the then Madras presidency. That is when VOC gets arrested, Subramaniam Siva gets arrested, and Bharati's concentration was turned to that. Bharati himself was a witness in that Tirunelveli riots case. And for about 3-4 years, there was so much of political unrest in the South that Bharati probably thought on one side, his concentration was divided, the other, he had to protect people like Nivedita, where, not rope them into the controversy, because that was when South was really boiling. And that led to the murder of Collector Ash and all those, chain of events.
Even at the time, VOC was condemned for 2 life imprisonments to kind of, and Subramania Siva was also jailed. And even G. Subramania was going through a stressful period, and he decided to challenge. Yes. So the British, because of it's a consequence of the Anushilan things that erupted in the war. British are willing to take anything. When it comes to violence, terrorism. They're taking very hard measures against the talking about the. So this could have happened.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आदरणीय डॉक्टर ध्रुव ज्योति बोरा जी, डॉक्टर सदानंद मौर्य जी, डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी, डॉक्टर संयुक्ता दासगुप्ता जी। बहुत ही अच्छा सत्र रहा ये, और इसमें जो उत्तर और दक्षिण के बीच में जिस सेतु बनाने का काम जो भारती ने किया था, उसके पीछे कितनी प्रेरणाएं थी, उन प्रेरणाओं पे बहुत ही अच्छे तरीके से बात हुई। ये सत्र यहीं पर संपन्न हुआ। हालांकि असम में तो सत्र की पूरी एक परंपरा है, और वो सत्र ऐसा है कि जिसमें चर्चाओं और कलाओं की सुविधा है। शंकरदेव ने एक बड़ी परंपरा शुरू की थी, तो ये सत्र भोजनावकाश के बाद